I call the honourable member, the honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Thanks, Madam Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Why is the government's priority a plan to bring back knights and dames, but there's no plan for Alcoa workers, for car workers, for Qantas workers? Prime Minister, why are his Liberal government's twisted priorities so out of touch with the needs of ordinary Australians?
Before I call the Prime Minister, I simply want to say that there was silence, as it should be, on my left for the asking of the question. I expect the same silence for the answer. The Prime Minister has the call. The member will resume his seat. I name the member for Isaacs. I name the member for Isaacs. The Leader of the House.
I move that the member be excused from the service of the House.
All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. To the contrary? Aye. I think the ayes have it. Division required. Ring the bells for 4 minutes. I call the manager of opposition business.
Madam Speaker, I seek leave to move a resolution which has not been moved in this form in the House since 1949. That the House has no further confidence in Madam Speaker. On the grounds, A, that in the discharge of her duties she has revealed serious partiality in favour of government members. B, that she regards herself merely as an instrument of the Liberal Party and not as the custodian of the rights and privileges of elected members of the Parliament. C, that she constantly fails to interpret correctly the standing orders of the House. And D, of gross incompetency in the administration of parliamentary procedure.
Before I call the Leader of the House, I would say to the Leader of Opposition Business that earlier today the Opposition was unable to call a division on a second reading speech because they had one member only in the House. Subsequent to that, they called a division on the question that the bill be agreed to and then called the division off. Then, when we had a division on the third reading and all the members were present, they failed to provide a speaker on the next piece of business, and I suggest they get their own House in order. I now call the Leader of the House.
Leave is not granted, Madam Speaker.
Leave is not granted.
You're not granted leave on this.
The manager of opposition business has the call.
Madam Speaker, I move that so much of the standing and sessional orders be suspended as would prevent the honourable member from Watson from moving the following motion forthwith. That the House has no further confidence in Madam Speaker on the grounds A, that in the discharge of her duties she has revealed serious partiality in favour of government members, B, that she regards herself merely as an instrument of the Liberal Party and not as a custodian of the rights and privileges of elected members of the Parliament, C, that she constantly fails to interpret correctly the standing orders of the House, and D, of gross incompetency in the administration of parliamentary procedure. Madam Speaker, I note that this is an example of all the noise being on this side of the chamber. The reason these standing orders need to be suspended on this, Madam Speaker, in the first
There
instance—
will be silence on my right so that the Speaker may be heard.
Madam Speaker, what has just happened in this House is worthy of suspending standing orders. Never before in the history of the Commonwealth of Australia has someone been named for calling out Madam Speaker. That's what just happened in this House. Under no definition of what is within House practice or the history or anything that has happened in this parliament since 1901 has anyone claimed that the words Madam Speaker or Mr Speaker were unparliamentary. And yet not only he didn't just get warned, he didn't just get thrown out, he got named for calling you Madam Speaker. Yesterday we had a member of parliament thrown out for laughing. Madam Speaker, we have spent months watching you laugh at every joke from the ministers at the expense of members of the opposition. But somehow that is an appropriate way to conduct the role. Madam Speaker, I don't dispute what you said before about the fact that there are times in this chamber when things are cooperative. And the example you gave this morning, you articulated in a way that I would not disagree with one bit. But I do disagree with your decision to make that argument from the chair before the Leader of the House decides whether or not to grant leave. Because the comments you made, Madam Speaker, were reasonable comments for someone on either side of the chamber to make, but not reasonable if you're meant to be the Speaker of the House of Representatives. Madam Speaker, it is acknowledged on both sides of this House and throughout the country that you are a formidable parliamentarian. That is acknowledged. It is acknowledged that for your entire time in opposition and when you've sat on those benches, you have been one of the people who has been able to come to the dispatch box and launch scathing and effective attacks on us as the Labor Party, and you are respected as a member of parliament for that. But we cannot support you continuing to behave that way when you want to sit in the Speaker's chair. Madam Speaker, it has been, and for the claim of stunt that I heard from the front bench, Madam Speaker, we have not rushed to this. We raised concern on the day that you were brought in as Speaker that the tradition referred to in practice, and this is why we should be suspending standing orders, that the tradition referred to in practice that non-executive members nominate and second the election of Speaker and then bring the Speaker to the chair is one of the powers of the backbench and the non-executive members of this House. That tradition was broken the moment you became Speaker. We then found on the 13th of November last year that despite the Prime Minister claiming that words specifically were sure to be considered unparliamentary, you decided that name-calling was going to be considered legitimate in this parliament. On the 19th of November last year, on issues we prepare a sheet most days, I'm afraid, and today is the day when, for the first time in the history of the Commonwealth, someone is thrown out for saying, Madam Speaker, that everybody has to acknowledge that this farce has gone on for far too long. Madam Speaker, on the 19th of November last year, you reinterpreted a question asked by the member for Herbert, who had made no mention of the question referring to numbers. I raised a point of order saying that there was an issue of direct relevance, and your response was the question was one that was pertaining to numbers, as was clearly indicated by the questioner. Notwithstanding that there was no reference to that in the question at all, but you came up with a new question to get around Standing Order 104. When we had the clean energy legislation carbon tax repeal bill, you waited until the moment when the opposition were moving amendments and then decided that amendments which had been flagged and had gone through the appropriate processes of checking would be disallowed by you, denying the opposition the capacity. We weren't expecting to win the vote, but we were expecting to have our right to be able to make our case. Madam Speaker, on the 2nd of December last year, we had a circumstance where the Leader of the Opposition, after he was given the call for one purpose, went on to seek leave. You claimed that you had called on him to resume his seat prior to him saying, "I seek leave," and we asked you to check the tapes. You came back allegedly having checked the tapes, Madam Speaker, and what you told the House was not true. You told the House that he again sought the call, the Leader of the Opposition. The tapes don't reflect that. The tapes show the exact opposite. But once again, the information provided to this parliament was changed so that you could pretend to be acting within the standing orders. Madam Speaker, the issues of time limits has been one where time and again we have seen ministers in this House be allowed to continue their comments for quite a period after their speaking time has elapsed. But when an opposition member asks a question, suddenly the 30-second rule is enforced and enforced completely strictly. If you want to provide a level of lenience for government members, fine. It's the impartiality of the way you do this job that's in issue, Madam Speaker. And to have a circumstance where leave is not granted for this resolution is extraordinary. As of the action that you took today, 98 people have now been thrown out of the House by you, every one of them from the opposition. 98 love. No Speaker in the history of Federation has a record like that. Madam Speaker, we have had a situation where we've had amendments. I remember we had an amendment that I moved to a resolution from the member for Denison, where you ruled, in answer to a point of order from the Leader of Opposition Business, that the amendment was too far away from the original motion. Notwithstanding that on the 2nd of December last year, you allowed the Leader of the House to move an amendment to a resolution from the Leader of the Opposition that completely reversed everything that was in the first resolution. Madam Speaker, if I stand to raise a point of order, you wait until the minister has completed before you hear the point of order. Madam Speaker, at each issue, at each part of this, the practice that is followed is the same on every occasion.
You're not a Conservative.
The Prime Minister right now is laughing, but he won't be thrown out, nor should he be. But can I tell you, when he defends knights and dames, it is really funny, and we will laugh. We will. But this resolution itself, this resolution today, Madam Speaker, is not one that people rush to move. This is a resolution, and every time, whether it's a suspension of standing orders or whether leave is granted, on every occasion that a resolution of this nature is moved, it is carried forever in practice, for the very simple reason that while opposition members, when they get to this point, don't expect to win the vote, they do expect to have a situation where everyone in Australia knows bias when they see it. Yeah. And, Madam Speaker, we don't doubt for 1 minute your effectiveness as a warrior for the Liberal Party, but that is not the job you chose to take on. And yet, in the Speaker's chair, you have continued to act as though enjoying the victory for your own side is your job. Madam Speaker, the parliament deserves more than that, and the parliament cannot have confidence in a Speaker who refuses to be impartial.
Is the motion seconded?
I second
the
the
member for
motion and
Grayndler
reserve
has the call.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I second the resolution and reserve my right to speak.
I call the Leader of the House.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker, and I do rise to defend your position as Speaker and to speak against the suspension of standing orders motion moved by the Manager of Opposition Business. And I would say to the government members that we regard this vote as a vote of confidence in the Speaker, and when the vote is taken, as far as the government is concerned, this will be a vote of confidence in the Speaker, and I am very confident that the Speaker will win. The fact that this is a stunt, Madam Speaker, is so clearly indicated by the fact that the Manager of Opposition Business came into the chamber with a prepared speech, which he then read from throughout his 10-minute contribution to the House. The Manager of Opposition Business has been building for this since the first day that you were elected Speaker. And I would remind him that when you were elected Speaker on November the 12th last year, the Manager of Opposition Business said, when they all return to Hogwarts, Dumbledore is gone and Dolores Umbridge is now in charge of the school. From the first day that you were Speaker, the Manager of Opposition Business and his cohorts on the front bench, like the member for Grayndler, the member for Isaacs, the member for Sydney, the member for Ballarat, have been deliberately trying to create an issue around the speakership by being rude, by being aggressive, by behaving quite intolerably badly towards a woman in the chair. Now, Madam Speaker, The member for Sydney had cause to say in August 2012 about the then Leader of the Opposition that perhaps he had trouble with strong women in public life. She said, "I think he does find it very difficult that he's dealing with two women in positions of authority, being then the member for Chisholm and the Prime Minister." But quite frankly, the Leader of the Opposition never spoke to either the member for Chisholm or the former Prime Minister in the way that the member for Isaac speaks to you in the chair, the way that, not as badly, the member of the opposition business. The member for Isaacs is a bully and an aggressive one at that, and he has deliberately been trying to be rude to you from his position. His shouting is over the top and loud, and it was all, I think, part of a deliberate strategy. And may I say, Madam Speaker, I'm no sook. I've been manager of opposition business for 5 years. I was manager of opposition business for 3 years in a hung parliament. I hold the record for being ejected from this place by speakers in the parliament. But I tell you what, I never complained. I never complained. I didn't stand up like a great big sook like the manager of opposition business did today and say, like one of my 4 children, that I've had my toy taken away from me. I know opposition is tough. Opposition is not challenging. It's not satisfying. You don't get to make any decisions. Paul Keating put it very well in a debate on the matter of public importance in response to the then member for Flinders, Mr Reith, when he said, "Honourable members opposite have 3 more years of their lives trotting around in opposition, 3 more years in the corridors at night, wandering in and out of each other's offices, having cold cups of tea at 11 o'clock. And you fall silent because you know it's true. The sadness is for the opposition, you lost the election. You have 3 years, hopefully more, in opposition, and you just have to get used to it. And when you're in opposition, you do get thrown out of Parliament more often than members of the government. But when I was in government, I was thrown out of the chamber, as was the Leader of the House. As was the Leader of the House when he was the Leader of the House. And you have to put up with it. That's the way it is. And you should hold the government to account. You should hold the government to account, because that's what a good opposition does. And the crossbenchers should do it as well. But when you speak to the Speaker, when you deal with the Chair, the way you deal with the member from Mackellar is utterly unprecedented in this place. I've been here for 21 years. I've been here for 21 years, and I have been shocked and appalled, as I hope a gentleman, with the way that you speak to the Speaker. And the fact that the member for Isaacs was named today was thoroughly deserved, Madam Speaker. Thoroughly deserved. And for the first time that the Speaker names a member for you to move this motion of no confidence is bizarre. It is ludicrous. It is over the top. It is a stunt. It is designed to hide the fact that the opposition doesn't have anything to say about the issues that the public care about. You have nothing to say about lowering taxation, about cutting regulation, about abolishing the carbon tax, about reducing the cost of living pressures on Australian families, about returning the rule of law to the workplace. You have nothing to say about these issues. So therefore, the tactics of the opposition has been one of distraction, one of trying to create distractions from the fact that they stand for nothing. And my advice to the opposition is you've got 3 years to learn why you lost the election in 2010, why you lost the election in 2013. In 2010, you only hung on to power because the opposition was able to negotiate with the crossbenchers. So after 1 term, you had less seats than the Liberal Party and the National Party in this House. And you've made no effort, the opposition has made no effort, Madam Speaker, to do the hard work of opposition, to prepare policies, to think about what you stand for. Graham Richardson tried to give you this advice in The Australian a couple of weeks ago in one of his columns. You should listen to Graham Richardson, because he was part of a successful Labor government. Now, none of you were, I know. You were part of a very failed government. It can't have been easy for the former cabinet ministers sitting opposite or former ministers to accept that after 6 years they were thrown from office in a landslide defeat, and after 3 years they had less seats than the other side of the House. It's hard for them to accept that, I know. But quite frankly, Madam Speaker, they have to accept it and get on with the fact that if they want to ever serve in government again, hopefully a more successful one than the last one, they have to do the work. Madam Speaker, when we're in opposition, the member for Scullin, the former member for Scullin, was in the chair. He lost a vote on the floor of this House. He lost a vote on the floor of this House in throwing out a member. It was the member for Patterson. Member for Patterson, Bob Baldwin, the member for Patterson. The Leader of the Opposition immediately moved a motion of confidence in the Speaker. Immediately, straight after. And the Prime Minister, Julia Gillard, had to second the motion. That's right. Because Labor's instinct wasn't to protect the Speaker. Labor's instinct wasn't to uphold the dignity of the office of Speaker. It was to use it as a pawn, as a negotiating tool, to get the member for Fisher to come over to this side of the House and sit in the Speakership to save you one vote. That's how Labor thinks the Speakership should be treated. And it didn't actually work very well for them, I hate to tell them. That's another piece of advice. That didn't go so well, did it? Unfortunately, the member for Fisher did not measure up as well as you had hoped. Now, Madam Speaker,
the member on my left will desist.
The Labor Party's tactics in this place have been chaotic from day one. Their questions are very broad. Their questions should be ruled out of order. But quite frankly, the Speaker has been very tolerant. If the questions being asked by the opposition, if I had asked them when we were in opposition, I would never have been able to get away with them. They are full of argument, they are full of abuse, and yet the Speaker has been very tolerant and very generous. And the reason why the Speaker has been tolerant and generous to the opposition is because she was a very effective member of the opposition over a long period of time, an effective member of government. And she knows that for democracy to work, question time needs to be allowed to run, to be able to flow. So she has, because of that innate understanding of how our democracy works, the Speaker has allowed the opposition to get away with a great deal more than I was ever allowed to get away with in opposition.
That's true.
So, Madam Speaker, rather than trying to make a political point and distract the public from their paucity of ideas by moving this motion, they should be actually congratulating you in the chair as a Speaker, because you have been much more generous to the opposition than I would have been if I was in your place. And woe betide that day if it ever comes, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I hadn't prepared for the speech like you have. Mine are written notes.
There'll be silence on my left.
Not the speech that you've got. Madam Speaker, my advice to the opposition is to get on with the job of opposition. As one person once said, opposition is slow boring through hard boards, and it is. It's not something you can just deal with tactically. And this is a tactic, this is a stunt, this is simply designed to distract the House and the public and the people from the shabby tactics of the Labor Party. So we do have confidence in the Speaker. We have absolute confidence in the Speaker. And as long as the Speaker wants to serve in that role, we will support her in the government from this side of the House. And the vote that we are about to take is a vote of confidence in the Speaker. I'll be voting with the Speaker, and I assume the government will be too, and I'd ask the crossbenchers to turn their backs on this shabby stunt and to support the Speaker.
The member for Greenlaw. The question is that the motion be agreed to. The member for Greenlaw.
I second the motion, Madam Speaker, and we all know that this is a position that you coveted for years and years. How sad is it, Madam Speaker, that having achieved this ambition, you have chosen the low road of partisanship rather than the high road of independence that this office demands. Madam Speaker, when you were the member for Mackellar, you were very fond of the big book. The big book. Well, I draw your attention to pages 563 and 564, which have a very simple principle. The Speaker must show impartiality in the chamber above all else. That is the fundamental principle upon which the reliance and integrity of this parliament resides. Now, those opposite say, oh, but we won the election. That is absolutely true. There is a majority there. But there are millions of Australians voted for us on this side, and they also deserve to be represented and not treated with contempt from the chair of the House of Representatives. It is one thing for this Prime Minister, when he was Leader of the Opposition, to want to trash the 43rd Parliament and come in here every day and move suspensions of standing orders and engage in disruptive conduct as a tactic. But it is another thing having won the election and achieved the high office of Prime Minister for him and his team to trash the 44th Parliament. So addicted are they to negative tactics, they engage in it. And we see it every day. We saw the Prime Minister last week, while the division was being counted, while the sand was going through the hourglass, looking upwards and giving directions to you, Madam Speaker, saying close the door, close the door, close the door. We see, time after time, the Leader of the House give instructions to you as the chair, including today. And Madam Speaker, we have a penalty count at the moment that if it was a South Manly game and the penalty count was 98-0 in favour of the home team, they'd be jumping the fence. They'd be jumping the fence. Because what we have day after day in this parliament is partisanship from the chair, is abuse of standing orders, is treatment of those on this side of the House, with contempt. And we're seeing it by this very process. We're seeing it by the process whereby those opposite aren't even allowing this motion to be debated. They're having a suspension of standing orders. What they should be doing is allowing this motion, and then it would be a vote in confidence in your speakership. As it is left hanging. It is left hanging as a result of them not even allowing the motion to proceed.
I would remind the member that he must address the motion as he is
I am, and that's why standing orders should be suspended. And you have just given a cracker of an example, Madam Speaker, a cracker of an example of your partisanship. Here I am saying why it should be suspended so that we have the proper debate and we have a vote in your speakership and whether you have the confidence of the House, and you interject from the chair, Madam Speaker, in order to slap that down. Well, today we had, in the naming of the member for Isaacs, an unprecedented action taken for such a minimal statement. I checked, Madam Speaker, if he said Madame Speaker, because I thought maybe there was something that was a reflection, but there was not. What we see from those opposite, and we see in this chamber every day, is the born-to-rule mentality of those opposite. We saw it from this Prime Minister. Just 2 days ago with his reinstatement of imperial honours, and we see it with your behaviour, unfortunately, Madam Speaker, each and every day in this chamber.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. All of those in favour, please say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. Aye. I think the noes have it. Division required. I call the member for bells for 4 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question is to the Treasurer. Will the Treasurer outline the state of the budget and the importance of governments living within their means? How will a government living within its means help West Australians?
I call the Honourable the Treasurer.
Well, thank you very much.
The member for Chifley will desist or leave. The choice is his. I said desist. If you don't know the meaning of it, look it up.
I thank the honourable member for Durack for his question. Her question.
The Treasurer will resume his seat. On a point of order,
Madam
the member
Speaker,
Greenland.
yes, reflections on members. Reflections on members.
If the member thought that meant that he was not literate, I withdraw it. I call the Treasurer.
Madam Speaker.
The Treasurer will resume his seat. The member for Greenland, and he doesn't need to shout.
Well, sometimes I do to get attention, Madam Speaker.
Not really.
And Madam Speaker,
I'm listening to your point of order.
I would ask that you withdraw the slur on the member for Chifley.
There is no point of order. I call the Treasurer. The member for McMahon.
Speaker, point of order. Insults are sometimes traded in this House. They should never come from your chair, Madam Speaker. You should withdraw without reservation.
And the member will not shout at the chair. That is a reflection on the chair. The Leader of Government Business has the call.
Madam Speaker, I would remind the opposition to perhaps refer to Hansard and all the epithets that I used to put up with from Speaker Jenkins, less so from Speaker Burke, and I never complained, and they should stop being a pack of sooks.
Well, I might add. The member for McMahon on a point of order.
Madam Speaker, successive speakers have ruled that withdrawals should occur without reservation, without qualification, and that should apply to the holder of the chair as well, Madam. It should apply to you.
There is no point of order. The member for McMahon will resume his seat. I would refer the honourable member to page 164 of the practice and page 189, and he'll take his seat. The member. There is no point of order. How do you know? Because I can anticipate that you're trying to disrupt the business of the House. The Treasurer has the call.
Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the Australian people want us to talk about jobs, about prosperity, about the economy, about the fate of their children. And these shenanigans from these fools on the other side are simply undermining the opportunity for Australians to deal with the issues that really do matter.
Both members will resume their seat. Now, the member will resume his seat. The Treasurer would to assist the House by withdrawing the term for all.
I withdraw. The fact is, Australians want us to talk about them.
I tell you, if only he had the class of his mother-in-law. That's all I can say. On that note, Madam Speaker, I ask that further questions be left on the notice paper.
The Prime Minister will resume his seat.
Madam Speaker.
I called.
Madam Speaker, what? I'm not here.
The member for Graindler has been on his feet raising points of order that were not legitimate points of order. Does he have one now that is?
How do you know, Madam Speaker?
Because I've heard them already. And I would refer you to page 189 of the practice.
I can take it from you.
I'm aware of practice, Madam Speaker. And one of the things that happens in not just in practice,
you will not argue with the chair. Take your seat. Resume your seat. Then give the point of order.
The point of order is one of the things we do in this place is not attack families. Is not attack families of members. That is one of the fundamental things, lines that we never cross.
The member for Graindler will not resume his seat. Resume your seat. The Prime Minister has the call.
Madam Speaker, obviously offence has been taken. I unconditionally withdraw.
The Leader of the House.
Madam Speaker, documents are tabled in accordance with the list circulated to honourable members earlier today. Full details of the documents will be recorded in the votes and proceedings. And, Madam Speaker, I move that leave of absence be given to every member of the House of Representatives from the